Hi, and thanks for watching this message video. Today we're continuing on in our series called The Super Cool Stories of the Bible, where we're looking at different stories and the lessons that we can learn from them. And today we're looking at the story of Abraham, who was considered the earthly father figure of the Jewish faith, as well as that of the Christian faith. Now, for those who don't know the story of Abraham and Sarah, they were very old and they always wanted to have kids, but they couldn't. Sarah was considered barren. She couldn't have kids. And in that culture, that meant that she was ultimately devalued, even though what we're told is that Sarah was one of the most incredibly beautiful women in that region, even into her old age. But in their old age, God came to them and told Abraham when he was 99, you're going to have a son within a year, which was huge for lineage purposes. And sure enough, within the year, this is what happened. Genesis 21:1. The Lord kept his word and did for Sarah exactly what he had promised. She became pregnant and she gave birth to a son for Abraham in his old age. This happened at just the time God had said it would. And Abraham named their son Isaac. 8 days after Isaac was born, Abraham circumcised him as God had commanded. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born, and Sarah declared, God has brought me laughter. All who hear about this will laugh with me. Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse a baby? Yet I have given Abraham a son in his old age. I know there are many, like Abraham and Sarah, who feel like God has given them a promise. And for many of us, we cling to that. However, if you're one of those people like Abraham and Sarah who have been forced to wait a long time, well, that brings us to lesson number 1 in this story, which is God can be trusted. Meaning, when God says that he's going to do something, then he will do that thing. The problem is, though, is that many of us don't like to wait. We struggle with the waiting. And those who know the story of Abraham and Sarah know that they did struggle with the waiting. That's how that whole Ishmael situation took place. And in that story, there are a lot of other lessons to learn. But in this story, here's what we can learn. First lesson is that God can be trusted. He will do what it is that he says that he will do, but yet we must wait. That's the first lesson. So with Abraham's lineage now secure, here's what happens next. Genesis 22:1. Sometime later, God tested Abraham's faith. Abraham, God called. Yes, he replied, here I am. Take your son, your only son, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I will show you. This next lesson is one that many followers are aware of, but the truth is we just don't like it when we are the student in the middle of this lesson. But nonetheless, here is lesson number 2. God tests us. And even though God will oftentimes test us with things that really don't matter all that much to us, please listen to me. God will test us with the things that we love the most. And with that in mind, we need to always remember what James, the brother of Jesus, said. James 1:2. Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. And by the way, as a side note here, God doesn't just test us personally. He will test an entire group of people or a church all at the same time. For those of you who know the book of Revelation, remember what it is that he wrote to those churches and how he was testing them and how he was warning them. Or for those of you who know the New Testament, look at what it is that Paul said to the churches in Corinth about how God was testing the churches in Macedonia. 2 Corinthians 8. Now I want you to know, dear brothers and sisters, what God in his kindness has done through the churches in Macedonia. They are being tested by many troubles, and they are very poor, but they are also filled with abundant joy, which has overflowed in rich generosity. Like with those churches, God tests our generosity, meaning he wants to see whether or not we are willing to share with him our stuff, and not just our stuff, our best stuff. For instance, for those of you who know, the oldest story perhaps in the Bible is that of Cain and Abel. And in there we see that what God wanted was for both of them to share with him their best stuff, which is what Abel did, but not Cain. Cain just brought some of his stuff. So remember, God will always test us, and not just with some of the minor things in our life. God will test us with the best stuff because he wants to see whether or not we are willing to share with him our best. This is what he was doing with Abraham. And this is how he handled his test. Genesis 22. The next morning, Abraham got up early. He saddled his donkey and took 2 of his servants with him, along with his son Isaac. Then he chopped wood for a fire, for a burnt offering, and set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day of their journey, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. "Stay here with the donkey," Abraham told the servants. "The boy and I will travel a little farther. We will worship there, and then we will come right back." So Abraham placed the wood for the burnt offering on Isaac's shoulders, while he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them walked on together, Isaac turned to Abraham and said, "Father." "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "We have the fire and the wood," the boy said. "But where is the sheep for the burnt offering?" "God will provide a sheep for the burnt offering, my son," Abraham answered. And they both walked on together. I want to stop here and point out what it is that Abraham said to his servants and to Isaac. You see, even though God had specifically told Abraham, "Go to this place, this location that I'm going to show you, Mount Moriah, and offer your son Isaac there as a burnt sacrifice," he specifically said to his servants and for Isaac, "We are going to go to this place, we are going to worship, and then we are going to come back." Which means Abraham genuinely believed that Isaac was going to be coming back with him, which leads us to the next lesson in this story, which is faith is expressed in words. Meaning what it is that we truly believe needs to be expressed with our words. And there is no doubt about it that Abraham 100% fully believed that Isaac was coming back with him, one way or the other. In fact, look at what the writer of the book of Hebrews said about this. Hebrews 11:17. "It was by faith that Abraham offered Isaac as a sacrifice when God was testing him. Abraham, who had received God's promises, was ready to sacrifice his only son, Isaac, even though God had told him, 'Isaac is the son through whom your descendants will be counted.' Abraham reasoned that if Isaac died, God was able to bring him back to life again. And in a sense, Abraham did receive his son back from the dead. Whether he thought God was going to provide a sheep or a lamb, or whether he thought God was going to resurrect Isaac, either way, he believed 100% that Isaac was coming back with him, and so he expressed his faith in his words, and so should we. Here's what happens next. Genesis 22:9. When they arrived at the place where God had told him to go, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. Then he tied his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham picked up the knife to kill his son as a sacrifice. At that moment, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham!" "Yes," Abraham replied. "Here I am." "Don't lay a hand on the boy," the angel said. "Do not hurt him in any way, for I now know that you truly fear God. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son." Then Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. So he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering in place of his son. Abraham named the place Yahweh-Yireh, which means the Lord will provide. To this day, people still use that name as a proverb. On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. When it comes to faith tests, everyone knows there's great value in expressing our faith with words. But everyone knows that there is something that expresses faith much louder, which leads us to lesson number 4. Faith is expressed in actions. Which means when it comes right down to it, what gives our words their greatest value is our actions. And if our actions aren't there to back up our words, that's when people become skeptics over what it is that we are saying and start to devalue it. But that's not what happened with Abraham. He not only expressed his faith with his words, he backed it up with his actions, and as a result, this happened. Genesis 22:15. Then the angel of the Lord called again to Abraham from heaven. "This is what the Lord says. Because you have obeyed me and have not withheld even your son, your only son, I swear by my own name that I will certainly bless you. I will multiply your descendants beyond number, like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will conquer the cities of their enemies, and through your descendants all the nations of the earth will be blessed, all because you have obeyed me." The reason why Abraham is called the father of faith, or the father of the Jewish faith, is because he passed one of the biggest faith tests that you could ever experience, which leads us to lesson number 5. God rewards past tests. Meaning when you and I pass these faith tests, God is going to reward us. He is going to bless us. He's going to show us how happy He is with us. And this is something that we see in all kinds of different stories throughout the Bible. So what have we learned in this story? Hopefully, what we've learned is that we can trust God. That when He says He's going to do something, we can trust that He's going to do it. That we can take our desires to Him, and when He has promised us that He is going to fulfill those desires, we can trust that He's going to. Yes, that might mean that we're going to have to wait. But that in and even of itself is a part of a test, which leads us to the next lesson that we should learn is that God will test us. Oh yeah, He will. He will test us with minor things and He will test us with big things because He wants to know whether or not we're willing to share with Him the best things. Now, in this story, we also learn that when we have faith, it is supposed to be expressed with our words. And so when we're in the middle of these faith tests, we should continue to express what it is that we believe, and then we should follow that up with our actions, knowing that in these faith tests, what God is doing is developing endurance inside of us. In other words, He's trying to bring us to a place of maturity and completeness. And that when you and I are passing these tests, God's going to bless us. He is going to reward us. He is going to show us how happy that He is with us, just like James, the brother of Jesus, said. James 1:12. God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Afterward, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love Him.